There you see now how all your so-called power counts for absolutely nothing. How your entire empire of destruction comes crashing down, all because of one little cherry. One little. What a lovely ballet ensues, so full of form and color.
Hi, it's Mo. Okay, listen, I just finished the last vlog because I hadn't finished it. It is now Wednesday, July 15th. So there's only 2 more days in this week. We started this week on the 11th, and on the 11th, I finished a book. I finished Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. It was just a little past the end of Summerween. I forgot to mention, I think, in my last vlog that it was Summerween, so I was reading a couple of Summerween-ish books. Lately, I have not been in the mood to read for reading events, I think. So I've been kind of keeping it in the back of my mind, but I haven't been like forcing myself to read books for reading events. Like, I really wanted to read for June on the Range, but it just didn't happen, so I didn't, unfortunately, get that one done. But I did want to pick up Lock Every Door by Riley Sager for Summerween, and I read it during Summerween, even though I didn't finish it during Summerween. This is Riley Sager's 3rd book. He's a thriller author from New Jersey, and every time I read a book by him, I say I'm not going to read anymore, and then every time I see a book by him, I just pick it up. I've read 5, this might be the 5th or 6th book by Riley Sager that I've read, and there's only one that I really liked, that I thought was really fun, that I remember a lot of, and this one probably will not be on that list of being able to remember which Riley Sagers that I've read. But this is the last of his backlog that I want to read. I do have one more, which is The Last Time I Lied, but I'm not really interested in that one. That one's like, girls go to summer camp, and then something happens, and then maybe one of them lied, and maybe some of them are dead, and blah, blah, blah. Like, I've just read that too many times. I'm just not interested in it. Like I said, this one I was interested in because this one is about Jules, who is down on her luck. She's an orphan. Her parents have died. Her sister went missing when she was a teenager, which really puts like a shadow over Jules' whole life. And then her parents die unexpectedly. She's in college when that happens, and she follows her best friend to New York afterwards. But in the very beginning of this book, we find out that she's just lost her job and her boyfriend, like basically in the same day. Now she has nowhere to go. She's staying on her friend's couch, and she doesn't want to be a burden. She's looking for jobs, but she's not finding anything. There's nothing about her degree or her education that's helping her when she sees an ad in the paper for a house sitter at this very prestigious apartment building in, I think, the Upper West Side, possibly Upper East Side of Manhattan, and it's offering quite a hefty sum to come and apartment sit. She goes to this interview like just wanting to go to this apartment building because she's read about this apartment building since she was little, because this apartment building features heavily in a book that she and her sister loved. So she like kind of just wants to go because it's a connection to her sister, it's a connection to this book, she's interested to see what's going on there. She doesn't expect to get this job, but once she tours the apartments and once she hears how much money they're offering, it's a job that she can't refuse. Like, she thinks it's a little weird that they're offering money to stay in an apartment, but there's also all these rules about the apartment building and why the apartments need to be occupied at all times and all this stuff. So Jules like, I don't know, maybe it's fine, whatever. And she starts living there. And then, of course, weird stuff starts happening, and you really don't need to know more than that. But I will say that I was hoping this went the way of my favorite Riley Sager, and it didn't. As far as I know, that Riley Sager is the only book that does that thing that I liked. So I like it when my thrillers get cuckoo bananas. And this one, I could see if you had read this when it came out at like in 2019, maybe you would have thought this was cuckoo bananas, but it really wasn't. It was like pretty standard and pretty forgettable. So am I glad that I read it? Yeah, I mean, I guess I am, because like I said, there's only one book left now of his backlist, well, of his actual backlist. So I haven't read the train one. I haven't read the one with the male protagonist, and then he has one coming out this year. So technically I have 2 other backlist books, but I'm talking about like I don't know. What was the last one? I don't even remember. I honestly don't, like, his books are so forgettable, but they are really readable and they are fine. They're not like as fun and silly and goofy and bananas as I want them to be. So anyway, I'm not going to read The Last Time I Lied. I am going to read the one with the male protagonist and the train one if I ever find them, but I don't seek these out. I just pick them up if I happen to see them. This one I got earlier this year at the Wall library sale. The next book that I finished this week so far was What Kind of Woman by Kate Baer. This is the second Kate Baer that I've read, and this is her first collection of poetry. So this is all about womanhood and life and raising children and being a mother and being a woman. It has a little bit to do with the pandemic. It was published in 2020, I guess later in 2020, once the pandemic had already started. Kind of coming of age into your womanhood. Not a lot to do with her younger years, as in her as a child or her as a teenager, but more as a young woman, a young wife, a young mother. There's a lot of poems in this about motherhood, which I don't love, but I think they're interesting poems. And then there's a lot of poetry in this collection about marriage and being married, being a wife, which I find a little bit more interesting in a concept. Overall, I enjoy Kate Baer's writing. I read her next collection earlier this year, which I think was a little bit more formed, a little bit more honed, but had very similar themes. And I said then, and I agree about this book, that this is kind of the mid-30s, late 30s Ruby Core. Probably even a little earlier than that, maybe 30s to mid-30s. So like the next step from Ruby Core, dealing with tough subject matters, dealing with, real topics that people face, dealing with motherhood, dealing with life as a woman, but in these very digestible, sound-biteable poems. Not quite as clipped, not quite as short, not quite as TikTok-y as Ruby Core, or I guess at her time it would have been like Twitter when Twitter existed, but like not far off from there either. I will continue to read Kate Baer. I will continue to pick up her work. I was glad to have gotten this. It's very quick poetry. It's very easy to read. It's very digestible. Again, if you read Ruby Core and you liked her work as a teenager and you're now in your 30s, you're now a mother, you're now a father, you're now a husband, you're now a wife, I would definitely suggest picking this up. Enjoy them enough to continue them. I enjoyed them enough to keep on my shelves. I don't overly identify with them. The next book that I finished this week, I finished right after this one, actually, the same day, The Clock House Murders by Yukito Ayatsuji, and this was translated from the Japanese by Ho-Ling Wong. I love this series, which follows an amateur detective, an amateur sleuth, who was once practicing to be a priest, and who now, in this, the 4th installment of the Bizarre House Murders, or the House Murders as they're usually called, he's become a mystery writer. So in the beginning, he just liked mysteries, and he happened upon some of them, and he is also obsessed with this architect who made all these weird houses, so he goes specifically to these houses to look at this architecture, and these houses also are all wrapped up in crimes. So our main character, it's so interesting because his name is different in the first books, and then he calls himself something else in this book. Detective Shimada is what he's called in the first 3 books, and then this one he calls himself something different, I think because it's his pen name now that he's like actually writing mysteries. So Detective Shimada is obsessed with this architect. The first book, The Decagon House Murders, is about the architect and the house that the architect lived in. This architect went around building houses for people in Japan that are like really weird, very specific, starting with the Decagon house. And then in the first book, we see that he died in the house several years ago, and a Golden Age Mysteries Lovers Club is coming to the house several years on to like stay in the house, and it's like a fun romp, see if they can like discover what the mystery of him dying was. And then every book is kind of similar. So like in the Labyrinth house, there's a bunch of people who go and stay in this house that he created that was the Labyrinth, and then there's murders, and then there's murders, and then there's murders, and then there's murders. There's murders in every book. There was a lot of murders in the Clock House Murders. These are just so fun. I really love them. They are golden age mysteries for Japan, which was actually in like the 70s and 80s and 90s, but they draw a lot on the golden age mystery of Europe and America, which is like Agatha Christie, which was from like the early 1900s to the mid 1900s to like mid-century. And in the first book, The Decagon House, like the Mystery Lovers Club, they all use different names. And something that I didn't realize until reading this installment, The Clock House Murders, was that not only are there these mysterious houses, these murder houses, but they're also all have naming devices that change. So like in every book, someone is going by a different name, or in the Labyrinth House, like they all had rooms that were different names and they referred to each other by the rooms that were different names. And in this one, it's very similar. There's people with like similar names that get involved, and then maybe they're mistaken for other people, and then Shimada himself is going by a different name. He's going by a pen name. So like I don't know why I didn't pick up on that theme throughout the books, but I wonder culturally like what that's all about, or if it's just kind of a nod to a lot of mysteries of the time and how they often had people going by different names or mistaken identities or, you know, et cetera, et cetera. The Clock House Murders sees one of Shimada's friends who we've met in other books going to another of this architect's home, one that was owned by a clock collector who recently passed away. So he has a very tragic story. His family has a very tragic story. But one of the weird things about this house is that it has a clock tower on it. And then there's like an old wing where they housed his whole entire clock collection, which is like thousands of clocks. And they're all set to the exact same time. And they all chime at the same time. A group from a local college is going there to spend the night in the old wing, which is purportedly haunted by this man and his daughter and his wife who all passed away. They're like a paranormal club and they're going with a psychic. So they are going to get locked in by the caretaker of this house for 3 days. And they're not going to be able to get out. They're going to be in with this psychic and they're going to have like a seance. So that's the basic premise. And then somehow Shimada always gets wrapped up in these things. His friend tells him that he's going and he's like, oh, maybe I'll stop by the clock house and see what happens. And so that's what he does. And then he gets involved in the mystery. And then, of course, at the end, he solves the mystery. I mean, they're all a little bloody, but this one was definitely bloody. There was a very high body count in this one, and there was some gruesome scenes. They're not fade to black. They're definitely graphic, but they're graphic for the time and for the culture. So they're not like horror gory. All of the books have like a very unsettling, gruesome, scary theme and feeling to them because these houses are so weird and you don't know what the tricks of the houses are going to be. All the houses have some element that is unexpected and you just don't know what it's going to be. So this one was an interesting one overall. I thought this was a good installment. I do find the naming device theme to be a little bit difficult, especially because I read these all on audio. This just came out this year, by the way. These were all written in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, but they're just getting translated now. So the Decagon House Murders, I think, got translated like 8 years ago, and then they've had one come out like every year, every couple of years. Since then, there's quite a few in this mystery series. So as soon as they come out, and as soon as this one came out, I got it on Hoopla. So I don't even have the books to be able to like look at the books and try and figure out who's who. So these books do take me a little while to like remember which character is what. And then like Shimada was called something different in this one, and then his friend was called something different for some of the time. You do have to like pay attention to them, and I do feel like this particular one, the Clock House Murders, wasn't my favorite for that. The first one's the Decagon House Murders. That one, it's like one for one who's named what, so it's not that difficult. But then the Mill House Murders, I remember there being some confusion over the names, but I did enjoy that one quite a bit. Then the Labyrinth House Murders was the hardest one for me because there's also someone pretending to be someone else in that, which was like very confusing to read on audio. I think if I had read it physically, it would have been easier. And then the next most confusing one for me was the Clock House Murders. And then apparently another one is going to come out, which is probably the next one that they're going to translate. And that is the Black Cat House Murders. So I'm super excited about that one. I'll continue to read these as long as they put them out. I love them so much. Those were all the books that I've read so far this week. I have mostly been working. We have been going to the beach. My husband had off quite a few days. Well, okay, he didn't have off quite a few days, but he stayed home and worked from home quite a few days. So we were able to get out to the beach at a reasonable time. We're going to keep trying to do that whenever possible. Today he's working though. I'm working tomorrow and Friday after work, but I will try to update you because I do think I will finish at least one or two more things at the end of the week. These weeks just haven't been very exciting. I went to the Ladies Auxiliary book sale last week, which was really fun, but I took some footage, but not much. You'll have seen it already. Next week, I am doing something exciting, and I'm hoping that I will be able to take you along for that. But mostly we're just plugging along. I'm like working this new position at my job, trying to get better at self-discipline and trying to work longer days and longer hours. Also trying to get the house under control. I mentioned last week that we had some flooding in the basement because of the severe flooding and rain in my area. And I really haven't worked enough on that to try and save items that did actually get wet in that little bit of flooding. It's not that our basement flooded, it's that we have French drains, and if the groundwater is really high, we also have a sump pump, but if the groundwater is really high, water like seeps up from the ground. So it didn't like flood, but water comes in onto the floor of the basement, and then everything that's on the floor of the basement gets wet. So there are some boxes of books on the floor of the basement that got wet, so I need to go through those and move them from one box to a new box. We've been trying to get bins, and we've been trying to move as much as we can into bins and also get rid of as much as we can. So I don't think that's going very well, but those are all boring things that I'm doing, but hopefully some fun things too, like going to the beach and the fun stuff that I have going on in the next couple of weeks. And when I read some more, I'll let you know. It is the end of the week, and I've finished 3 more books. I finished A Few Rules for Predicting the Future, which is an essay by Octavia E. Butler. This is the 3rd Octavia E. Butler that I've read, and this is like a very sweet edition with all these cool illustrations. It is just a very short essay that she wrote for a magazine, I think in 2020, and it kind of follows a conversation that she had with a fan, and then how that fan interpreted that and wrote something about it, and her ideas for predicting the future. And basically the whole thing is, she says that there isn't one way to predict the future or one way to fix the future if you know what's going to happen, but you could be one of the answers by learning to be a better person. You know, very short essay, republished in this, like I said, cool little edition in 2024. I was super happy to find this. I think it's such a cute, cool little book. I don't think that the edition exactly matches the essay. I mean, it's extremely, extremely short, and I think it's mostly relying on your knowledge of Octavia E. Butler predicting the future in works like Parable of the Sower and books like that, so that you want to pick up this sweet edition. So I'm glad I found it in a little free library and I didn't pay for it, because it is $15, or it was $15 for this teeny tiny little hardcover. The art is by Manzel Bowman. I enjoyed it. I'm glad to have read it. I'm glad that I have it. I will keep it on my shelves, but look it up online. You could just read it online. It's a good little essay, but it's not anything incredible, I don't think. The next book that I finished this week was The 7 Moons of Maali Almeida by Shehan Karunatilaka, and this won the Booker Prize in 2022, and this is a ghost story. So this follows Maali Almeida when he reaches the afterlife, and he has 7 moons to kind of wrap up his business in between death and wherever he's going to end up in the afterlife. So he's in this kind of waiting room, this kind of area, call it a purgatory, whatever, but he is able to see what's happening on Earth, see what's happening with the people that he loved. He goes on a journey to manipulate what is happening because he was a photographer and took pictures of pivotal, important political moments. So he worked around and sometimes within different political parties and political goings on in Sri Lanka and in other places to photograph and depict the horrors of war and the horrors of what was happening to people in those communities. But he wasn't necessarily like a wholly or truly altruistic character. You know, he had a love of his life, Dee Dee, but he cheated on Dee Dee all the time. He had sex with random people. He gambled. He let the other love of his life, which was his platonic love of his life, kind of be led on by thinking that maybe they would get together, which you kind of find out throughout the book, you know, was that true or was that not true? But that's what he thinks. This reminded me actually a little bit in character of Mr. Loverman, not only because this is a gay male character who cheats on his husband / boyfriend, but in the idea that Maali and I can't think of the guy from Mr. Loverman's name now. What was that character's name? I can remember his love's character's name, but Maali and that character both saw themselves a certain way and thought they were a certain kind of person and lived life as that person without understanding the consequences and the impact that they had on other people in their lives and these people that they loved, these people that they cared deeply about. They didn't see the true nature of their relationships until something had to happen. Something needed them to force them to realize how they actually treated people and what kind of person they actually were. And in Maali's case, it's because he died. Was he murdered? Maybe. Who was he murdered by? These are all questions that we're trying to find out through this book. Was he murdered because of his work? Was he murdered because of something else? Was it his fault? Was it someone else's fault? I really like this one. I thought it was really good. It took me a little while to get into. I read it on audio. The audio was fantastic. I loved it. But it was a little slow. I think probably this book is almost 400 pages, and I think probably 75 pages could have been cut out. Maybe 100 pages could have been come out, and this would have been a more impactful novel. I just think there was a lot of going back and forth of Maali understanding the underworld and understanding where he was and trying to figure out how he could enact the changes that he discovered that he needed or wanted to enact, you know, once it was already too late. Like, obviously it's not too late because he's doing things in the underworld, but I thought the ending was really satisfying, and I thought the whole thing was like really interesting and good, and I really liked the narration. So I can't wait to read more from this author. This is the author's second work. They have one other book, so I will keep my eye out for that. But I really enjoyed this one. I'm so glad to have read it. I just got this one recently this year. And then the last book that I finished this week was Facing the River, New Poems by Czeslaw Milosz, and this was translated by the author and Robert Hawes from the Polish. So this is a collection of poetry from a well-known, renowned poet. I do believe that Milosz was a poet laureate or a Nobel laureate poet at some point. And these poems are really interesting because these are later in his life, and he's returning to Poland where he never thought he was going to return to, not Poland, Lithuanian, sorry. He's Lithuanian, and he's returning to Lithuania where he never thought he would return because of the war and because of other things, and he's kind of ruminating on his time. He's ruminating on the nature of change and how much the landscape has changed. He's facing the river. He's thinking about poems that he's written for authors. There's an interesting one called Undressing Justine, which has a longer explanation of what the poem is, and then it also has the poem. There's two like that I really enjoyed because it gave a lot of cultural context to what he was talking about, not only in this exact poem, but in other poems too that I wouldn't have known because I don't really know anything about this culture. So it was really interesting. He had a poem to Allen Ginsberg. He has a lot of literary references in here. A lot of poems that feel like looking back at a younger self when you're old and thinking about the differences of being old and being young. So I did really enjoy this one. It took me a little while to get through. I didn't necessarily resonate with every single poem, and I do find that like very, very long form poems, several page long poems, sometimes just trip me up a little. Like I don't want to read them, or I'm not in the mood for them, or if I'm not in the mood for them, I find them hard to read. But I did really enjoy this one. So those are 3 more books that I read in July. I have decided that in this video, I'm going to end it a little bit later. So the last day of this weekly update will be Sunday, July 19th, and then I will start a new vlog on Monday, July 20th, because I feel like I've been tripped up in these vlogs the whole time because I'm trying to force a weekly thought process that I don't have. Like I've been trying to do Saturday to Friday, and I just don't think of the week in that order. Have you ever seen that thing where they say like, oh, say how you would show a week? Do you show it in, or a month, or time? Do you show it in like a circle? Do you show it in this and this? Do you show it in, you know, specific days? Like how does it work? And my week just has always been Monday through Sunday. Like I think that has a lot to do with my career and how a lot of restaurants and a lot of places think of the week as Monday through Sunday, because the weekend is the toughest part of the week and Monday you have like a reset. But I also think it's just that makes sense. Like if you're gonna have a weekend, it doesn't make any sense to me at all to break up the weekend like a very traditional workforce does with Sunday to Saturday. That is insane to me. So I want to change these videos to be Monday to Sunday, and that works well because next week I'm going away, or this coming week I'm going away, and I'm going away over the weekend. Instead of breaking that trip into 2 parts, it'll only be like 1 part pretty much. And then, you know, obviously sometimes I do 2 weeks in these videos, sometimes I do a few extra days, sometimes I don't update you until the last day of the week, or sometimes I don't update you well, or sometimes I don't even finish the update until the next week, which is what I'm doing today because technically it's Monday the 20th. But I wanted to come in here and mention that. So the other thing that I wanted to talk about, I did just want to touch base on Herkid. I think you'll see this video before you see my Herkid July video, but I have really been enjoying it, and I've been like spending way too much time on it. It's so much fun to try and organize it. I just put the week out where I planned my attack of Herkid and what I was going to do, but over the last couple of weeks I've been trying to fit in the books that I read, and the way that I originally was going to do Herkid was just to mood read and just to read how I normally read and then fit books in, which I'm still going to do. But what I'm finding just almost a month in is that I'm going to end up having a bunch of books that I can't use. I mean, I could really force the prompts and use them only in the Herkid prompts that exist. But what I think I'm going to do instead is I'm going to add prompts to Herkid. So I did create a new bingo board that instead of being 5x5, it's 5x6. And I added new prompts. But obviously, like, I'm not just adding new prompts that fit the book. So even some of the books that I read won't fit those prompts. So what I'm going to do with those is make a leftover pile basically, and anything that doesn't fit, I'm going to see if I can work into other prompts. That sounds really confusing, but when I do my Herkid video and I explain my personal bingo board, I think it'll make a little bit more sense, hopefully. But it's been so fun to move the books around within the prompts and try and figure out what I want to read and what I can read. Like, oh my god, I had such a disappointing thing. There's this one prompt that's bookception, which is read a book that was mentioned in another book. So you have to read a book that mentions a book, and then you have to read that book that was mentioned. And I thought I found one, and then I didn't have it. Like, I had read the title of the book wrong that I had, so it doesn't work for that bookception prompt, which is so sad. And I'm already close to completing a couple of the prompts, obviously some of the easier ones. One of the other things that I've struggled with is like moving books around, and like never settling. And I decided that it's better just to settle. It's better just to complete prompts when you feel fine about completing them, and then let them go so that you can move on to other prompts and try to fit the books into other prompts. I think that's how it's going to work, and I think that's what I'm going to do. Let me know if you've read any of the books that I read this week. Let me know what you thought of them. Thanks so much for joining me today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!